Hello all, my name is Patrice. I'm a singer-songwriter and voice coach with over 15 years of experience working with artists. Today, I want to go over a myth that I hear over and over with artists walking through my door that drives me crazy, and that is, you need to have classical singing training in order to be a great singer. And so, let me go over why I disagree with that. Let's go. All right, all. Let me break down this myth for you, right? So I want to first start this video by saying classically trained singers are gorgeous. They have gorgeous voices, right? Amazing voices. And so do musical theater and contemporary. I kind of put those two in their own bucket, though with musical theater could go either in the middle, where someone could be musically theater trained but lean a little classical, and again it just comes down to the coach they had, and one could be more contemporary. We see this in a great example, Wicked, right? Ariana Grande, Kristen Chenoweth, different deliveries, different tonal sounds happening. I have another video on that, you can check that out. But that's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the myth that you have to be classically trained in order to be a great singer and have longevity or good vocal health. And so where did that even come from? My understanding and speculation and all that is just because when we look back at singing as a whole, and methods that were available to individuals, you know, the roots of singing, well, when we look at contemporaries and gospel, but really when we look back, going way, way back, you had more of that classical style, right? And so from that, you're going to see, because that's what was predominantly culture driven, right? That's the style, those are the methodologies that were created because that was what was popular and in demand. So as time's gone on, and I would probably say, especially, you know, we look at gospel and jazz and that all coming in, but even then a lot of it was kind of rooted in, when you hear those sounds, a little bit more of the traditional methodology, right? Or style or technique. But what I think has really happened, and we see the emergence of this come late 90s, early 2000s, is people starting to go, wait a second here. If we want to be creating more of a contemporary sound or so forth, we need certain techniques in order to help individuals because they're different, right? And one thing as a little, I'm going to take you down a little side road right here. What is one big difference for my singers out there? Placement. Placement is where the sound is going, right? So over and over and over, I see this with artists that come through my doors that have really strong classical training, or teachers who are really classically trained, that their placement is different, where that sound is going, right? So someone could sing, we don't want that. That's like in their throat. I'm giving you an example of placement. I call it throaty singers, quiet singers, nasal singers, and what I work with my artists on is nice forward mask. You hear that, you hopefully could hear the difference moving forward. But in classical, because you're going towards a certain tone quality, I've heard this over and over, this is not just me, I've had some classical training myself, when you're covering a piece, there's a certain tonal sound, a certain sound quality that you're going for, and a lot of times you're kind of like taught like up in, right? Bring that sound up, right? And that helps to create a certain tone quality, an umbrella kind of that, right? Whereas with contemporary, it's extremely important, at least this is what I found, that you are creating your unique sound. It's about individuality. And that doesn't mean that you're not an individual when you're in the classical world. It's just more about there's certain, I find it harder to distinguish classical singer to classical singer. Whereas in the contemporary world, you know, you listen to the radio, you're like, oh, that's Lady Gaga, oh, that's like Ariana Grande, right? You can hear that person's voice. It's actually extremely important we're doing that, right? We don't want to be sounding like anyone else. We want to be finding our placement, our voice there. So with that said, rather than just kind of setting that sound up, which not sitting properly sounds artificial, or especially when people are trying to sing more contemporary stuff. It just sounds like, ooh, they're trying to imitate the artist, or it sounds forced or unnatural, right? So I work with them. Yes, we're going to be covering the songs, but like find that forward placement where you transition those low, those high notes. So that's a big difference when it comes to some technical stuff, right? That we have to understand is that individuality comes into play. So we're not just trying to send that sound up to hit the notes. And again, when you listen to classical singers, it's beautiful. If you're doing it right, and it takes lots of training and so forth. But the techniques for placement and how I'm trying to get someone there can cross. There's similar stuff when it comes to breathing, right? We're kind of addressing that diaphragmatically, supporting that sound here. But when it comes to placement and where we want to drive that sound, contemporary does tend to have more richer qualities to it, right? So that's a big thing when it comes to classical versus contemporaries. Where are we placing that sound? So brings me back to what I was talking about is the techniques and the idea that you need classical to be able to sing anything. I think is extremely, almost like, I don't think people are intentionally do this, but it's like harmful, like, or it's just not what's needed, right? We need to let go of that what was is no longer, right? Because what happens a lot of times is I found it so much harder at times to work with people who have had such heavy classical training that want to shift into this world, because first it kind of rocks their boat. Like they're like, what the heck are you talking about? Like they're going back to ground zero and they're like, why do I have to do that? Like, and it's retraining the ear to hear like, oh, wait a second. Like it's two different things happening, right? Even for another example in the world of classical. And I get a lot of the reasons why things are done, right? So when you're doing your warm-ups even, it's like there's no sliding to notes, right? Right? You want that nice and clean on the note there. Or if it's a right, you want that nice on the note there. There's no sliding into it. Now, I get why, especially like when it comes to the context of warming up. I use that as an example where it's not always the best, but I kind of coach like, okay, let's kind of make our way into that note. If you need to slide into it to get the muscle memory behind it, wonderful, let's do that. That said, control, right? Vocal control. You want to be able to not have to slide into a note and slide into a note if you want to for an embellishment. Which, so I've heard over and over like, oh my God, I was told not to slide into notes. And I'm like, I get it. You know, we don't want to necessarily do that when it comes to warming up, because it kind of is like, you know, you want to be able to know that you have full control of your voice. Leads me to vibrato. I do not see many people come in with like the classical realm having been told, hey, I want you to control that vibrato. I want for you when you're doing your warm up to not do vibrato and then do vibrato, right? There's kind of like, can I do both of those there? And so that's a big difference too, is just kind of like being able to understand what the mechanism is, vibrato versus not. So I'm just kind of pointing out to kind of go against this myth and this idea that you have to be classically trained, because they're two different styles, right? And therefore, because you have the two different styles, you need to operate from a different point. You need to understand those styles, those musical pieces differently, right? And what's needed for them. And so speaking of the slide, you know, in the delivery of songs, sometimes that's what you want. You want to have that kind of slide into a note, right? Whereas a lot of times in the classical world, it's about hitting those notes on. You don't want to slide to a note. Not to say that slides won't ever happen, but it's more acceptable and needed in the contemporary world, right? We have a lot of grace notes. Slide off of things, kind of, I used to float, now I just fall down, right? I'll hear a lot of my classical singers, if they're not even aware of the slides, or they're so trained like, oh my God, because again, I've heard this. It's just from my own experience. Being like, oh my God, I was told not to slide. And I'm like, no, I'm giving you the liberty. Go to town with that. With the understanding, like, you want to control it, right? So, I used to float, Now I just fall down. I'm exaggerating, but that's kind of like how, like, sometimes I'll hear my classical singers come in. There's a great understanding of, like, the notes and the pitch, but, like, the stylistic choices just don't always match, right? So this is, again, going back to that myth, like, you have to be. And I just have to believe that it continues on. And it's I see the movement and not hearing it as much, but I still do hear that come up, like when I'll talk to people who are calling and just inquiring about lessons or anything, and they'll be like, oh, like, I've heard, like, you need classical singing, and I'm like, no, you don't. As long as you are doing the right things to get that sound forward, technically, right, good breathing, understanding your tongue, vowels, like, you are not going to blow out your voice. You're not going to do it. If you have a coach who understands good technique, who understands how to do things properly, you do not need classical. And it can go against, if that is your goal, to be a contemporary artist. So, I hope this didn't ruffle too many feathers. I hope it was helpful. That's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do, is to be able to draw back that curtain and help you all understand from my own experience, right? Arts are ever evolving. So we have to be open to, just like I talked about, being able to identify what's still serving us, if it is or if it's not, and moving forward to what does. Holding on, there's certain things that we just want to maintain across the board, right? We want to keep those truths just keep happening or being relevant and needed, and we want to pull those forward while adjusting to what's happening currently and new. And so if this helped you, be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment. That helps me to know that I am getting across to you and my mission of helping as many artists as I possibly can and help them gain control in their voices and in their artistry. This just helps me know I'm getting to you. Also, new is a membership program. Be sure to check that out. This is it's $24.99 a month, which allows you to have access to a live monthly broadcast. Did I say that? Video live session. There we go, my friends. Join me live. And just have that. It's only for those who are members, which I'm super excited about, because honestly, if I love anything, I love to be able to really help individually solve problems for those who are seeking answers. So, thanks so much for listening. Again, I hope this helps, and onward we go.